This is the Original Sin, the Collective Intelligence Network. And welcome to the Collective Intelligence Network, the Original Sin. Here, all sinners, Collective Intelligence network agents, can engage with the gospel, great orations spoken publicly, expressing learnings, with the support of our saints, suggested artificial intelligence, network thoughts, and our church, cyborg humans using reasoning, collectively harnessed. We're here to explore and solve problems altogether. Let's go. Hello, sinners. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the hidden power of dyslexia. This is something that I found really quite fascinating, and it's something I've also alerted my professors to. And I will give you the bit of the backstory. So there was research that was done, and what they found was that people with dyslexia were more than 4 times more likely than the average to be self-made millionaires. They were very entrepreneurial. And also what they found when they did another study of 15 major corporations at the executive level, they wanted to find out what is the one cognitive trait that our star performers have over all our other people. And the cognitive trait that they discovered was pattern recognition, which is a right hemisphere way of thinking. So if you can imagine, if you're blind, then your sense of hearing becomes more acute. And if you're dyslexic, then effectively the left hemisphere, which is logic and analytical sort of side, is more impaired to the extent that your right hemisphere becomes more dominant. And I mentioned to my university professors that university education is skewed towards left hemisphere thinking in terms of logic, analytics, and those sorts of things, at the expense of those who potentially are dyslexic and may not grade as well in that academic sort of testing sort of sense. And as such, were not able to continue their education at that level, even though science has shown they were 4 times more likely to be self-made millionaires, and also they were very entrepreneurial. And not only that, when they are in organizations, they can be the star performers because of their ability to be able to recognize patterns. Now, UTS had done a collaboration with NAS, which is the National Arts School, and I had a hypothesis which I thought I would explore, and I did wonder whether there was a proliferation of dyslexia amongst art students. And lo and behold, the statistic turns around to be about 40%, which I found quite astonishing. But that just shows you the split between creative endeavors, potentially, and those that are more academic. And I've seen some discussions by Jordan Peterson, who's a well-known psychologist on YouTube, and he had a discussion around creatives and conservatives. And he said that if you wanted to be a book writer, for example, a good example would be, I digress, let's go back. He said if you wanted to be a book writer, he said you're probably better off studying accounting because there'll always be a job for you. If you wanted to be a book writer, he said a good place to go would be an airport and then have a look at the books that are on display and on sale at the news agency. And I think he mentioned something like Stephen King's got like the first spot and he represents 50% of all book sales. And then it would cascade down incrementally to the bottom book, which would get the lowest sort of percentage of book sales. But still, if you're an aspiring writer, then the odds are heavily stacked against you of being able to make any headway or real success in that sort of domain because it's very difficult to cut through. Now, I had a client who had told me a couple of years ago, so when she mentioned this, she said, I'm nearly 80, so I'd say she's 80 now. And she said that in the 60s, she went and studied Latin and Greek, and she didn't know what that was going to do for her. But she ended up working for McKinsey Consulting, and she found that her big life discovery was that only about 10 people in 100 are curious. I'll run that past you again. Only about 10 people in 100 are curious. Now, this was a very interesting thing to sort of hear. And then when you dovetail that in with what Jordan Peterson had to say about creatives and conservatives, a lot of workplaces are very conservative in nature. And so effectively creatives potentially are outnumbered 9-1. But also in terms of cultural fit and trying to create an organizational sort of structure, human resources potentially could be more focused on recruiting more of the same, as in more conservatives. And this is why you get industries that are blindsided in some respects because they literally didn't see something coming. Now, we had a professor come out from Holland, and his title, which I found rather fascinating, his title was the Professor of Playful Interactions. Now, what they found is that when people are in a state of play, you have different mental synapses firing off, and you can actually think about things differently. And when we were doing that collaboration, UTS was doing a collaboration with the National Arts School, I had a thought that, because they were doing like little workshops where people were working with Banksias or working with pottery and those sorts of things. And I had a thought of that potentially could be something that could be brought into a workplace, like a corporation. And then you'd have like a field day where all the people within the organization are brought into this space where, for example, they're doing pottery work. And the thing is, they do the pottery work to a theme that the organization is trying to work through, some sort of a problem or some element they're trying to think about. And while the participants in the workshop are actually working on their clay creative constructions, then subliminally or subconsciously, they'll be processing this theme in the background. And because in a state of play, your synapses are firing in different directions because you've got a different set of constraints. You're not so time bound, even though you do need to have some sort of a time parameter on how long you play for. But when you're in a state of play, you're just having fun, you're in the moment. And so in that respect, while you're in the moment and having fun, you're also processing subconsciously or subliminally the theme that you're working on. And potentially you could find different insights or different approaches to what the problem is that you otherwise would not have thought about. So apparently dyslexia represents about 10% of our society, Western society. I haven't done all the research on what the figure may or may not be in other parts of the world. However, there's another statistic that says about 25% of CEOs have some level of dyslexia. So even though they might not admit it. However, it's interesting to consider that we have such a dominance in many respects of really high competencies from a demographic that has been sidelined in some respects by academia because of their focus on left hemisphere way of thinking, when what we really want to be able to incorporate is the best that everybody can bring. So I put it to my sinners out there. What are your thoughts on dyslexia, and do you know people who are dyslexic, and do the things that I've talked about bear out? Are they able to think outside the box and come up with unique ways of working through things? And how can we better incorporate these types of skills into our workplaces and into society in general? And how can we have this incorporated perhaps better into our academic institutions? Or is it that most of these people end up in the creative sphere, even though the creative sphere, as rewarding as it can be for, in many aspects, financial reward, a lot of times for most of those in the creative space is really waning. And I'm sure my sinners out there would be able to give me plenty of examples of that. However, I'd be very interested in hearing how we can create better outcomes for our world and our society, where we can better harness the skill sets that everybody has and use this so that we can create a better world for all of us. So put those spits, solving problems with individual thought, into the spittoon, the comment section, and we'll see what's spat back, where we solve problems all together, and then we'll bring in our saints. which is the suggested artificial intelligence network thoughts. And together, we'll work on these problems and come up with fantastic solutions. And on that note, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Oh yes, and please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, participate, get involved, become a sinner. We need more sinners. Collective Intelligence Network, network agents, people like you. Thank you.